Morning.
Good morning.
He is risen.
He is risen indeed.
All right. So, if you will, please turn your Bible to the book of Matthew, chapter 27. Matthew, chapter 27. And we'll get there eventually. And that will be in your Schofield. That'll be on page 1942. All right, so it's been a while since we've been able to meet. I've had some health issues and stuff come up. Did I say 19?
Yeah, I was going to say.
I saw you. 1042. I don't know why I said 19. I saw the puzzled look on your face and that gave it away. So, dealing with some health issues and other things that have come up and have kept us from being able to meet, but I'm happy that we are back together. So for this morning, for Easter Sunday, we are going to be looking at 3 points. First of all, crucifixion art. Secondly, thieves and malefactors. And then finally, the 5 crosses. And the title of this morning's message is Crucified with Jesus. Crucified with Jesus. Now, before we get into the gospel account, we're going to look at a few things. The crucifixion art. Common crucifixion art that we see typically will have either Jesus alone or Jesus with the 2 other crosses. This here is the first piece of, we'll put it in air quotes, artwork that we have showing the crucifixion of Jesus. Most of you probably have seen this before with me. I've used this before. And it was found, it was called the Alexamenos Graffito, discovered on Rome's Palatine Hill in 1857. The inscription carved into a wall is believed to have been intended as a mockery towards Christians, as the head of the figure on the cross is replaced by that of a donkey. You can see that there. Accompanying the image are the words in Greek, roughly translated, Alexamenos worshiping God. And of course, so this was meant to be a slander, a put down, if you will. Continuing on, what I did is I did a search on medieval art. Medieval art of the crucifixion. You can see on the screen here, okay, this is your typical medieval art. Obviously, you got the halos around those who the Roman Catholic Church considers to be their saints. Included in there would be Mary, the mother of Jesus, and the apostles. Of course, you have a very graphic scene here. You have probably representing hell down here, people fighting and stuff. But this was done by the Greek painter Andreas Pavius, and this is the title of his painting, The Crucifixion. Notice here that you see the man to our right of Jesus. Notice what he's doing. Notice how they put him on the cross. He's backwards, right? Obviously, that's not how he was crucified, but it was common at that time to do that because they labeled this gentleman as the impenitent thief. The impenitent thief, the one who was reviling Jesus on the cross. And so, in order to show which one was reviling Jesus, I don't think the gospel accounts give us which one on either side of Jesus. And I could be wrong, but I can't remember off the top of my head. If it said, the thief to the left of Jesus reviled him. And it might have, and I just have mistaken it. But here we have him turned around, showing that he is the impenitent thief. The next one is another Greek artist by the name of Emmanuel Lombardos, and he has this picture of the crucifixion. Again, we see the 3 crosses. Again, we see the man with his back turned. Actually, you know what? I went ahead. I wanted to point out one thing on this last one. The first picture right here. Can you see this lady right here being held up? Anyone want to guess who that lady is being held up?
Mother of Jesus.
Yep, Mary, the mother of Jesus. I wanted to point that out and I forgot to. So let's get back to this one here. So interesting here. We even have a guy on a ladder. It's probably supposed to be. Doesn't look very Roman to me, but it looks to be that he's about to break his legs or something like that. But it's just interesting to see the art depicting Jesus along with the two on his side.
That
Another
had
one.
Mary too. That had Mary being held up. Right there, down on the bottom toward the left.
Yeah, over there. Good eye. Next one that we look at is by Theophanes the Cretan, another Greek artist, painting of the crucifixion. And again, what do we see? We see same guy on the same side with his back turned. The impenitent thief is what they call him. Another, what's that?
And Mary.
And Mary again
And
being
then the
held up.
skull at the bottom.
You see supposedly the gates of hell. There's the chalice that he's drinking from.
There's some similar.
So a lot of similarities. You can tell this is all medieval art. Another one, Jonas Maskos. I don't know if I'm saying his name right, but he's been dead since 1721. You can't tell me that I'm saying it wrong. This one is interesting. This one I found. Okay, notice the impenitent thief. Which way is he looking this time? Toward us. But notice the one to the right of Jesus, our left. Notice he's got a little halo around him. Okay? That is because that's the thief that repented. Okay? That's the thief that repented. It's interesting, though, that this one would show that the thief repented and then have this guy turned around and going on. But again, very similar. Very similar art. This one is different. Okay, notice the angle that it's been done in. And this was done by Giambattista Tiepoli. I don't know if I'm saying his name right, but and this is found at the St. Louis Art Museum. But what makes this one unique is that he shifted the viewpoint off to the side. Most crucifixion art has Jesus in the middle, right? And then if it has the two on the side, it has those two directly on the side, but Jesus is the focal point of it. Whereas he still has Jesus in the middle, if you look at the artwork, but he makes it at a different angle, if you will. And here again, what are we seeing? The three on the cross. Common picture that we see at this time of year. You'll have a lot of people posting that today. Excuse me. The three crosses. Right? We all know what that means as Christians. We grow up seeing that, and that's what we see all the time. Now, what I did is I did this AI prompt. The original picture that I had up front was an AI prompt, and I had it make that picture. This AI prompt, notice, and I put it on the screen because I wanted you guys to notice what I'm doing here. I put three crosses with Jesus and the thieves on a hill outside of Jerusalem. Herod's temple in the background. Okay? Tell me what you guys notice on that. There's two different ones.
The height difference. Also, there's two towers, and it's the temple as it is today.
Nope. This building here,
Is the dome.
it's the Dome of the Rock.
Yeah.
The Muslim Dome of the Rock that was, that according to Muslims, that was built over the rock where Abraham sacrificed Isaac. It is also where they say that God created the world from that particular spot. By the way, the Dome of the Rock was built anywhere from 688 to 692. It is impossible that Dome of the Rock would have been there at the crucifixion of Jesus. Also, notice on this one, these two little towers.
Those towers.
Okay, notice those two towers. Those are called minarets. Minarets. Those are Muslim minarets. And they're used, typically built adjacent to mosque, so that they're used to project the Muslim call to prayer 5 times a day. So when I type in Herod's temple in the background, because I was hoping to get Herod's temple in the background, this is what AI did. And let me tell you, the number of times I've tried, could never get Herod's temple in the background. So one time I did a prompt, just simply Herod's temple. And it gave me Herod's temple. It gave me the temple of Jesus. And I know AI has been confirmed to be fully on the left on a lot of things, but isn't that interesting? It pushes the Dome of the Rock and the minarets, things that weren't created for another 600 years, into this piece of art, if you will. I just found that interesting, so I wanted to just share that with you guys, that if you're trying to do something like this and you're trying to be very specific, I was happy with that, kind of showing the town and everything, but then you get to the Dome of the Rock and the minarets. Point number 2, thieves and malefactors. Thieves and malefactors is what we're going to be looking at next here. And one intriguing thing that we see about the gospel accounts. Now we're going to get into the gospel accounts. One intriguing thing that we see is that if you look at the scriptures closely, there start to be some discrepancies in the crucifixion accounts. And we need to check those out, and we need to see what is that about. The discrepancies involve the individuals who are crucified with Jesus, or alongside Jesus, if you will. In Matthew chapter 27:38, what do we read here? We read that Matthew writes, "Then were there 2 thieves crucified with him, one on the right hand and another on the left." Mark chapter 15 says essentially the same thing, verse 27, "And with him they crucified 2 thieves, the one on his right hand and the other on his left." Now the Greek noun for thieves there is leistes. Leistes. And in the Greek, that means to rob, one who openly takes property from another person using violence. Okay? Definition of a thief. Pretty plain, pretty simple. By the way, this leistes is the same Greek word that Jesus used in Luke chapter 22, verse 52. You can see on the screen behind me. "Then Jesus said unto the chief priests and captains of the temple, and the elders which were come to him, Be ye come out against a thief?" Now, what occurrence was this? This was when Judas betrayed Jesus and told the religious leaders that where Jesus would be at, and Jesus said to him, "Do you come out against me as if I am a thief?" So the same word that Jesus used here in the garden, okay, is the same word to describe in Matthew and Mark, who were crucified with Jesus. Yet, if you look in the book of Luke, chapter 23, Dr. Luke records that there were malefactors crucified with Jesus. Malefactors who were put to death with him. Luke chapter 23, verse 32 says, "And there were also 2 other malefactors led with him to be put to death." Verse 33, "And when they were come to the place which is called Calvary, where they crucified him and the malefactors, one on the right hand and the other on the left." And then in verse 39, we read, same chapter, "And one of the malefactors which were hanged railed on him, saying, If thou be Christ, save thyself and us." So, the Greek adjective for malefactors, and you can see it on the screen behind me, is katorgos. Katorgos comes from the Greek word katos, katos meaning bad. Something that is bad, and ergo meaning to work. Ergo is where we get the word for energy. And so it's basically meaning an evildoer. The word malefactor means an evildoer. This particular adjective in the Greek is found only 4 times in 4 verses in the Greek scriptures. I just gave you 3 of them on that previous slide, all in the book of Luke. The other time is found in 2 Timothy 2:9. When Paul writes to Timothy and he says, "Wherein I suffer trouble as an evildoer." That's that same word right there. "Even unto bonds, but the word of God is not bound." Now, one can argue that thieves can be the same as malefactors, right? Couldn't you say that? They could be. They could be evil and they could be robbing people with violence. That is definitely a possibility. Yet the use of the two different Greek words raises the possibility of them being distinct individuals. That Matthew and Mark record for us two, while Dr. Luke gives us two others. The distinction becomes more apparent when considering that that Matthew states that they are thieves, that both thieves reviled Jesus. Matthew's account, he states both thieves reviled Jesus, whereas Dr. Luke's account records only one. Now, that doesn't mean there's a discrepancy here. It could be that just Dr. Luke said, you know what? He only focused on the one. That could be. And we have other places in Scripture where that happens, where the number of angels in the empty tomb of Jesus, one gospel account says one, another gospel account says two. Okay? Those discrepancies are okay. We just got to figure them out. But there is a discrepancy on there. And what is he saying? What is going on? Or what are the gospel accounts telling us? If there were only two thieves crucified with Jesus, and I should have had on here, we then have a possible disagreement in the Scriptures. The common belief of only two being crucified with Jesus, we've already started to see just a little bit, but don't worry, I'm going to improve the case as we go along. Okay? Continuing on. Another piece of crucial evidence supporting the conclusion that the thieves and malefactors were not the same individuals is the timing of the crucifixion. The timing of the crucifixion. When you look upon the crucifixion closely, when you fully examine it in the Scriptures, it becomes apparent that the two malefactors were crucified simultaneously alongside Jesus, while the two thieves were crucified later in the day. So, I'm laying the premise out. Let's look at the facts. Go back if you want, or look on the screen. Luke chapter 23, verse 32 through 33. What does Dr. Luke record for us? And there were also two other malefactors, led with him to be put to death. And when they were come to the place which is called Calvary, there they crucified him and the malefactors, one on the right hand and the other on the left. What does Dr. Luke say? These malefactors were crucified at the same time as Jesus. Right? Excuse me. Okay? Now let's look at what the Scriptures say about the two thieves. Remember, Matthew and Mark identify them as thieves. Dr. Luke identifies them as malefactors. Matthew's account in Matthew 27, verses 33 through 38. And when they were coming to a place called Golgotha, that is to say, a place of a skull, they gave him vinegar to drink mingled with gall, and when he had tasted thereof, he would not drink. And they crucified him, and parted his garments, casting lots, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by the prophet. They parted my garments among them, and upon my vesture did they cast lots. Verse 36. And sitting down, they watched him there, and set up over his head his accusation written, This is Jesus, the King of the Jews. Everything there complies with the previous account that we just read about in Dr. Luke's account, right? Okay. But look at what verse 38 says in this account. What does verse 38 say? It says, Then there were two thieves crucified with him, one on the right hand and another on the left. And you might say, wait a second, isn't that just saying the same thing? Matthew makes it clear that the two thieves were crucified after Jesus was. Jesus was crucified up here, right? We just read that account. Jesus was crucified here. Dr. Luke says that the two malefactors were crucified at the same time as Jesus. Matthew then says, then were there two crucified with him, one on the right and on the other on the left. Matthew writes that this took place on Golgotha when Jesus was crucified. Right? He gives us the whole crucifixion account just summed up in a couple verses. Here's Jesus. He gets the vinegar. He's mingled with gall. The two thieves were crucified, which were after the two malefactors which were crucified. Notice back here again. Notice the word in verse 38, then. 38, then. That word then is the Greek adverb tote, meaning then at that time. So let's read verse 38 again. Then at that time, after Jesus was already crucified, after him and the malefactors were crucified, then at that time were there two thieves crucified with him. You see? By using the word then, Matthew is indicating a sequential order of events. Matthew is writing and saying, hey, this also happened, and implying that the crucifixion of the robbers occurred after Jesus was crucified. If Matthew, listen to this, if Matthew had wanted to convey that the robbers or the thieves were crucified at the same time as Jesus, what word would he have used? He would have used the word and. To include them and saying, oh, all of this was happening to Jesus and to these two guys. To these two guys. To show that the events were happening at the same time. The first two individuals that were crucified with Jesus were called malefactors. Remember that from Dr. Luke's account, right? They were called malefactors, and they were led with Jesus to be crucified according to Dr. Luke. Look at it again. And there were also two other malefactors led with him. Does that mean that they're at the same time? To be put to death. And when they were come to the place which is called Calvary, there they crucified him and, notice that, and the malefactors, one on the right hand and one on the left. By the way, the word for other found in Luke chapter 23, verse 32 is heteros, where we get the word for heterosexual. Okay? Another of a different kind. Someone who is heterosexual likes a person who is another of a different kind. They're of the same species, but it's the male and the female. Okay? So, Dr. Luke makes it clear. I shouldn't say makes it clear, but gives us a little clue. There was two others. Not just the two that I'm talking about. Thus, they would have been positioned on either side of Jesus, the picture that we often see regarding the crucifixion. So, the three that we see, Jesus in the middle and the two on the side, are the malefactors that Dr. Luke is referring to. That Dr. Luke talks to, that's the common picture that we see. Later, the other two individuals, known as thieves, were crucified, and we see that from Matthew's account as well as Mark. And they too would have been placed on either side of the malefactors. So what you would have is you would have the thieves on the outer side, then you would have the malefactors, and then you would have Jesus. Okay? It was the two malefactors who being positioned on both sides of Jesus, thus allowing them to be close enough to him that when they spoke to him and railed against him in the King James, and when Jesus, and then the one was the penitent one, the one who repented and say, Jesus, will you remember me? And he said, verily, verily, I say unto you, today you will be with me in paradise. Those are the two. The Dr. Luke account, those are the two that Jesus spoke to. Those are the malefactors that Jesus spoke to. And again, there's the account again. Luke chapter 23, verses 39 through 43. There Jesus says, verily I say unto thee, today shalt thou be with me in paradise. Now, let's just go a little bit deeper. The writer of the Gospel of John confirms this conversation between Jesus and the two malefactors in John 19:18. It says, where they crucified him, and two other with him, one on either side, one, and Jesus in the midst. So we see John, the writer of the Gospel of John is very clear. Jesus was in the middle. You know, I've often thought, like, how do we know that Jesus was in the middle? Well, the Bible tells us, right? The Bible tells us, makes it very plain. But in the Gospel of John as well, is that, let me get back here. John 19:18, where they crucified him. Okay. Now, one of the reasons why it's commonly believed that there were only two crucified with Jesus. First of all, you cannot find art from throughout history. At least I spent a lot of time this week trying to find it, and I was showing you guys some of the art that I found that depicts 5 people at the crucifixion. I told you there, all I could find was 3 or 1. 3 or 1. Listen, when you get that over the centuries, what are you going to start to believe? That there was only 3. Wasn't it Joseph Goebbels who said if you tell a lie enough, people will start to believe it? Or something along that line? And the whole power of propaganda. You start to just repeat, and you do the same thing, and what happens? We all just follow along like sheep. And we just believe. And John 19, verses 17 and 18 says this, "And he, bearing his cross, went forth into a place called the place of the skull, which is called in Hebrew Golgotha, where they crucified him and 2 other with him, on either side one, and Jesus in the midst." Now, here is something that is not going to be so easily known just from reading the text and dissecting it. This is something that is going to, I believe, show that there were definitely 4 people crucified with Jesus, and this is only found in the Greek. This is only found in the Greek. All of the English versions make it kind of difficult to understand. This phrase here in the Greek is 3 Greek words. These 3 Greek words right here. Okay, I'm not even going to try to say them. I have a hard enough time speaking English. On either side, one. In the original Greek, there is no word for one here. Okay, there is no word for one. In fact, the phrase on either side one in Greek is often used to indicate that something is situated or located on both sides of a particular point or area, serving as a way to emphasize symmetry or balance. This same Greek phrase is found one other time in the scriptures. It's found in the book of Revelation, chapter 22, verse 2, and it speaks of the tree of life growing on either side of the river, or we can say on both sides of the river. The tree of life growing on both sides of the river. If you go back to John 19:18, and we read it as it's translated in the book of Revelation, it would say something like this. And 2 other with him, 2 on either side, and Jesus in the midst. It's just in the matter of the translation. You see it in the Greek, you don't see it in English. 2 on either side. The Young's literal translation does a really good job at this. And I don't think I have it on here. There it is. Young's literal translation, right on the bottom. Robert Young, his translation is in English is considered kind of rough English, but there's a reason to it. And it's because the Greek order of writing is different than the English way to write. We have, certain format and the way things are written in order for it to make sense. You might even notice that if you know another language, and sometimes they'll have the verb in a different place. Sometimes they'll have the subject in the wrong place. Sometimes they'll have the word no in front of something, and when actually it should be at the end. It's just different languages. Young's literal just takes it Greek and just literally translates it straight from the Greek down. So that's why it's rough English. But look at what he says. He says in his translation, where they crucified him, speaking of Jesus, and with him 2 others on this side and on that side. So what is Robert Young doing? He's telling us there were 2 crucified with Jesus on either side of him. Robert Young makes it clear and says, and Jesus in the midst. Although, of course, the modern translations don't make it easy for us. In fact, they further perpetuate the myth that there were only 2 crucified with Jesus. English Standard Version, 1 on either side. NASB, 1 on either side. NIV, 1 on each side and Jesus in the middle. Right? So what are we seeing? We're seeing the same thing. The Message. You guys all know how I feel about the Message. right? And what does the message say? The message says one on each side. Jesus in the middle. Now, another piece of compelling evidence that we could look at is the presence, of the evidence that there were 4 others crucified with Jesus, is the soldiers' action of breaking the legs of those on the crosses. Okay? John chapter 19, verse 32 says this, "Then came the soldiers and brake the legs of the first and of the other which was crucified with him. But when they came to Jesus and saw that he was dead already, they brake not his legs." How many of you, and maybe it's just me, how many of you ever thought that that was kind of a weird scene? Okay, let's take the traditional 3. Okay, the Roman centurion comes on one side, breaks the leg of one of the guys on the cross, walks past Jesus, breaks the other legs of the other guy, and then comes to Jesus and says, "Oh my gosh, he's dead." Why wouldn't the Roman centurion know that he was dead when he walked past him? Why would he not stop at Jesus? You see what I'm saying? If there were 2 on either side of Jesus, this now makes more sense. The Roman centurion starts on the side, gets the very outside one, right? He gets the thief, then he goes to the malefactor, right? He breaks both of their legs, and then he comes to Jesus and says, "Oh, he's already dead." Now, the account stops there. Why? Why does the account stop there? Because Jesus is the focal point. Is that what you're going to say? Yeah, he's the important one. That's all I would. But think about it. If you have the traditional way, it would mean the Roman centurion walks past Jesus, doesn't realize he's dead. No, here's a guy who deals with death on a daily basis. Don't you think he would have recognized that Jesus was dead when he walked past him? I highly doubt he was the type of Roman centurion who walked with his head down, looking at his phone, and not even paying attention as he walked past Jesus. Doesn't make sense. If there were only 2 crucified with Jesus, Jesus being in the middle, in the order that we read from the Gospel of John, the soldiers would break the legs of one of the malefactors, walk past Jesus to break the leg of the other, then come to Jesus to then see that he was already dead. I don't think that Roman centurion would have done that. I really think that as we built the case through the scriptures, we see there were 2 on either side of Jesus. Just doesn't make sense. Especially when you look at that John account right there. Yeah, you know what? Some of that stuff you have to look into the Greek, and that makes it hard. And I understand that. And when you're just looking at your English Bible, it's easy to be confused. And especially when we literally have centuries of art that tells us there were only 3 crosses. Centuries of art. I tried. That's why that the first slide that has the 4 other crosses with Jesus, that's why I had to make it with AI. Because I could not find one. I could not find a piece of work that shows that. Now the last thing, just something to close on, the 5 crosses. This is known as the Jerusalem cross. So in my research in the last couple of weeks doing this, I came across this. You might have seen this. This was often seen during the Crusades. This was used often during the Crusades. And notice this, 1 main cross and 4 others. Now, I searched and searched all throughout the vast internet land, right? And the most things that I were finding are all Roman Catholic, but that's because that's kind of the dominating aspect of things, especially when it comes to this cross. But I found it interesting because they all have their reasons why there's 5 crosses. There's the 5 wounds of Jesus, or it's Jesus and the 4 gospel writers. I'm wondering, and I couldn't find enough evidence to support this. I literally just ran out of time. But I'm wondering, is this symbol of the 5 crosses? Because that was what was at the crucifixion. You have the main cross, the 2 on either side. One last thing. here is some evidence of 5 crosses. Now, obviously, this is definitely not from the time of Jesus, okay? But this is found, I have it on here, 15th century, okay? This is found in the region of Brittany, France. I'm not even going to try to say all that other perfect location. I cannot speak French. But notice this. The middle cross is higher than the other. And by the way, it's surrounded by the 4 crosses. And if I remember correctly, I think the middle cross actually has Jesus and Mary inscribed on it as well. And you can find this in France. It looks like it's obviously out of place. I mean, look, there's someone's home right there, you know. But that's what you get when there's a place full of history. So, I don't know, like I said, I think those 5 crosses, the Jerusalem cross, and think about it, it's called the Jerusalem cross. Where was Jesus crucified? Outside the gates of Jerusalem. And there were 2 crosses on either side. Now, because a couple times I got a little bored in doing this, and I could not find what I was looking for on AI. I'm going to show you guys one example that I can guarantee or hope pretty much that at least my children will like this one. The Minecraft version. The Minecraft version of the crucifixion.
I like how they have a sieve at the bottom of the cross. That's like that threshing thing.
Yeah.
A sieve.
Oh. Sight. There it is.
Yeah,
I was looking at it like the steps leading up to the cross.
You know how there were steps.
Yeah. I know. I was having some fun. I got tired of trying to get the perfect picture. The best picture was that very first one. Then I realized that there was the death lady in the front. But yeah, I mean, there's so many others, you know, I was just trying to do. I mean, it just takes a long time to try to get 5 crosses. And half the time when I was trying to do the 5 crosses, by the way, there were 2 of the thieves, usually the ones in the middle, were just hanging in the air. There was no cross. It just showed them hanging in the air. I'm like, I can't show that. But anyways, I thought we would just end on a light note. And with that being said, it is a wonderful thing that we can celebrate that Jesus did not remain on the cross, whether it's a Minecraft version or not. But that he was buried and 3 days later rose. And it was on this day that we celebrate the resurrection of Jesus, proving that he is both Lord both of the dead and the living. And what a wonderful hope that we have, because unlike any other religious leader out there, ours was resurrected. And he resurrected himself. And he gives us that hope of eternal life. And with that being said, let us go ahead and close in prayer.